Hello, everyone, and welcome back to another episode of Hardcover Hooligans. I'm Danylo. I'm joined here by my good friend and literate ape, Mac. And I have a very important question for you, Mac.
Yeah, please, go ahead.
When you inevitably exploit the belief and culture of an oppressed people for your own political gain, how many wives do you want?
2! I want 2 wives, Danilo!
Two wives?
Yeah! Me and Paul have a lot in common.
And then another old one to carry your stuff around for you, right?
Well, yeah, I'm not an idiot. Of course. I gotta have my Skyrim NPC I can dump all my little plastic spoons I find around the world on.
And all the children you have.
Of course, and that die-off screen.
All right, so everyone, we are back at it with the classic science fiction novel Dune. We are reading the second part, plus the bonus reading, the appendices. Mac, did you read the appendices?
Nope. When the book was over, I shut the book. When the main book was...
Okay.
Well, I leafed through them, and then I was like, this is just lore, and then I closed the book.
Yeah, it's all just lore. I never read them before, and I thought you were going to read them and then call me out on it for not reading them, and so I read them.
Oh, no, the opposite has occurred.
I can do a little book report at the end of the appendices. They're interesting, but it's just like, here's all the lore I made up that I couldn't fit anywhere else.
Yeah, similarly to a different book, I was pretty sick of all the lore, so I didn't want to learn anymore. I was done learning.
Well, Frank Herbert was a coward and put it all at the end of his book in appendices, not full-page lore dumps before every chapter, like another author we could talk about.
He's a fucking loser.
So we are done with the novel. Mac, general vibes on the whole book before we dive into a plot summary and the description.
So, I'm not sure I like this book. Like, I came away sort of like... I thought that... Because, we talk... When it switches towards the end of the section we read for the last episode, and it starts to be more about, like, prophecy and messianic, is that the word I'm looking for? Religion? Mm-hmm. Like... Yeah, messianic, messianic type of story. I was like, oh, this is interesting. I'm looking forward to seeing the inversion of this like trope, and that never happened. Now, so here's something, right? I have learned, because I finished the book and I was like, that's ridiculous. I cannot believe. And it's because like this book and Dune Messiah were originally one book.
Oh, I didn't know that was literally true. I know people talk about
he wrote Dune and was like, no, this isn't good. I'm gonna add on to it like for this ending, and then that'll be the book. I could be wrong about this, but I was just looking this up, and I think the publisher was like, no, it has to be 2.
But I know people consider it like 2 halves of a full sort of story in terms of what Frank Herbert was trying to say. So that sort of makes sense. If it's not literally the second book, but like, spiritually, I guess.
Yeah. And from what I know about Dune Messiah, that tracks like the plot points about Paul's journey. But this book by the end, it really sort of feels like nothing happens, and then like a lot of stuff happens. And that's I know I feel like we're it might sound
every book we talk about.
I know.
Like, is this just what books do?
Well, I think it's like it's like the climax, and it feels like a lot at once because it's the climax of a book. But this book, like I don't know, there's like this book does not feel like it should end in a lightsaber fight, and it actually does.
A lightsaber fight where you know exactly who's going to win the whole time.
Yeah, and where he gets rid of the whole concept of shields because even he knows it's stupid. Like, and they just have like a normal knife fight. I don't know. Just by the end, I sort of felt a little a little out in the cold on Dune. I think I still like it, but I don't. There's like real Dune. There's Dune heads. There's huge Herbert heads out there. And
yeah,
I don't think, unless I read, I think I'm going to read Dune Messiah because I have to. Like, it's driving me up a fucking wall. Like, I just need to figure it out. But yeah, what did you think?
I think when I first read this book, in high school, I finished it, and I think I thought I missed something, and there was things I did miss because I was in high school with, lower reading comprehension.
Yeah.
And I read this book, and then about halfway through, I'm like, oh, I'm feeling this. This is good. And then it sort of got to the same point when I read it last time, and then it ended, and then I was annoyed.
Yeah.
My arc was sort of, I started the book annoyed, and then it was good, and then I ended it pretty annoyed. In that, I think it felt like a book of all setup, and then the payoffs weren't payoffs at all. So it felt very anticlimactic in a way that does not feel on purpose.
Yeah. No, I agree. And that, could be because it's supposed to, Paul's story ends in a different book.
Yeah.
Which sucks. That fucking sucks. I did not know that when I went into this book. So just reading that in a vacuum, I'm like, what the hell?
Interesting. Because then I read... Because then I read Dune Messiah after reading this in high school, and I literally remember nothing from that book. I think it went way over my head. I think it gets into the more that prophecy, emperor, power thing.
Well, I've heard through the grapevine that this is the best written book.
Yeah, I think in terms of a book, I also, being annoyed by the end,
of course,
I went through, and it sounds like the general consensus is, Frank Herbert maybe didn't have the best writing skills to express the ideas he had in the form of science fiction novels.
Yeah.
Because I think the ideas, overall, I think the originality and the world building and the ideas are super cool.
Oh yeah, definitely.
But then on the page, you're kind of like, what? It's I don't know. It just doesn't come through, which is why it's cool in another book series we've talked about.
Yeah, I was unfortunately getting vibes like that.
It's cool when you're describing it to someone, but actually going through it, you're kind of like, what? Okay.
And that's why I didn't read the appendices, because I was like, I care about these characters. And, we're talking about it. I was getting towards the end of this book, real Brandon vibe a little bit from the way these characters are talking to each other. I'm like, I'm like, this, every time I saw this funny forum post that was every time, and I totally agree, every time a character says anything clever, another character internally is like, look how the spider weaves their web of... It's it happens every fucking time. And there's no, these people aren't characters. They're cardboard cutouts of, it's like a morality play almost. It's like Everyman. You ever read, is that what that's called?
The Everyman?
Yeah.
They all represent the thing that Frank Herbert has decided they're about.
Yeah.
There's some people that feel I feel like Jessica is the most person who's like a person. And even that, is not great.
I think Gurney Halleck is the most well-rounded character. He just appears again in the back half of this book and is going through. I mean, he has he's a pretty funny scene. I think it's funny when we first meet him again. I was like, this cannot be how we meet Gurney Halleck again, and he's just cool with all this murder. But I thought him. I was pretty bored, and then Gurney Halleck comes back, and he's like, "Yeah, I love you, Paul." And then in his inner monologue, he's like, "But I'm gonna fucking kill your mom." I was like, "Oh, that's awesome." Now that gets resolved pretty lamely and really fast, but like that was an interesting like character dilemma, because once Paul becomes Muad'Dib Atreides, he is not a character anymore.
No, and he was like went to whiny little boy, and then he had like a drug trip, and now he's like Jesus Christ.
He does feel
like that's not a character.
Yeah,
it does feel like reading a book about aliens. Like they all feel like aliens, and like I think there's possibly an in-world explanation for that, in that they are
right.
But
interesting.
I think Occam's razor makes me feel like they're just not very well-rounded characters. But I think we're getting very in the weeds, and we've not described anything that has happened. So when last we left Paul and his mom, they were stuck in the desert, and they are trying to escape. They run into a sandworm, and they sort of get chased by a sandworm into a sort of like a rock lair where they run into the Fremen.
That's convenient.
Yeah, very convenient.
They run right into Stilgar.
And they run right into Stilgar, which is the leader of the Fremen, who had an agreement with Paul's father. And there's like a power standoff that feels weird. I don't know, how do you, like, Stilgar's like, oh yeah, I liked your dad, so I'll save the son, but this woman's just dead weight. So she has to like prove herself, and then she like, there's a lot of power posturing with like the Fremen. Like they're all hyper obsessed with like, how are we gonna like demonstrate that we can subdue these people?
Yeah. Well, they're like a nomadic warrior tribe. So, so they only, because this is, I'm happy you brought this up. So they only accept Paul because they like Duke Leto, right? Not because just he's like a man.
Yes, I think in the beginning, like, we'll protect the son, and then, but like Jessica, we don't know, and then she uses her Bene Gesserit space nun mind powers. The weirding way.
Jessica's whole gimmick, I think that I didn't have a problem with that, because her whole gimmick is like, for lack of a better term, this is not, I'm just gonna say it, she's like a femme fatale. You know, like she's like, oh, the Duke's like very beautiful concubine, but really she's a Jedi. Yep. But it's obviously more nuanced than that. But I thought it was, because I like Jessica a lot. In this book, especially in this second half. She and Gurney Halleck are my favorite parts of this second half. And she, I like that they're like, well, Paul's like a young, like we can teach him to fight. And then he's like, well, what do you have to offer? And she's like, I have a science fiction magic. And he's like, all right, you want to be my wife?
And I can teach all of you.
And I really appreciated that Stilgar, there's like this weird, I kind of thought this was like fun. They have like a weird flirty relationship at first, and then they're both kind of like, no, I don't know, but maybe, I don't know. They have a real it's a real Ross and Rachel, a real Stilgar and Jessica.
I just thought, because it never comes up again, I just thought it was kind of weird.
Yeah.
I don't know if I was just like on the lookout for weird stuff that stands out. I don't know why.
Well, they never like find, actually they do. They find Gurney Halleck, but like Paul at this point is essentially the leader, and he just accepts these people. But we never see them accept somebody into their tribe except for Paul and Jessica.
Yeah, I guess. So then I guess from that point, like, is that from that point of view, like, it is a very big deal.
Yeah, I think so. Especially like an off-worlder, because they talk about like their city people who later in the book they talk about city people, and I assume if one of them found their way out into the dunes, this might be like a similar, like, this is how you get accepted.
Yeah, I think we only know of like 3 people who get accepted by Fremen culture, and it's Jessica and Paul, and then Liet Kynes' dad.
Oh, that's right. Yeah,
That one of the appendices is about him.
Well,
he's in planetary oncologist.
This section too, isn't he? Or is that in the last section where he like has a dream about his dad?
Oh, so that's in this section too. So Liet Kynes, the Imperial Planetary Planetologist. Just mush those two words together. The Harkonnens, who are now back in control of Dune, are mad that he helped Paul and Jessica escape, so they leave him in the desert, and he hallucinates his dad lecturing him about how to make Arrakis habitable, and then he dies in a spice blow.
Yeah, I mean, yeah. That's he. Now we don't know this at the time, but he is hearing his dad so clearly because of spice, or is it because he's just dying?
I think he's just dying of heat exhaustion. Oh, okay. And so Frank Herbert needs to get some of the crazy ecology stuff that he wants to say in to this story somehow. So we get a death scene about, like, we need this percentage of the surface land to, like, be green, and we need this much water. And a big thing he talks about is, like, the Fremen culture. Like, wow, here's, like, a really ordered, stringent culture that, like, you can give them hope and they will follow all the rules you need to, like, conserve enough water to make it green.
Which is, they are doing that.
Yeah, well, and Kynes says, I think his dad hallucination says, like, there's the tragedy, like, it'd be a really bad thing if the Fremen fell into the hands of a hero, because the hero could, like, use them for their own purposes. Sort of the way that Kynes is using the Fremen and their belief structure for his own purposes, namely being, like, the ecology of Dune.
So this is the ecology. That's one of the appendices, isn't it? The ecology of Dune.
Yeah, it's called the ecology of Dune.
So here's okay. So I guess we can talk about this a little bit now. So going into this book, and people are like, it's ecological science fiction. I assume that in later books, the planet itself will start, like, rejecting the attempts at terraforming, and the lesson we, the audience, learn is, like, oh, this thing as a celestial body in a wider universe, maybe even in a religious context, exists for a reason to support the life that lives here. Like the I don't know if there's lore about if the Fremen are from Dune. No, they're not, right? Aren't they on other...
I think all humans came from Earth. This is, like, tens of thousands of years in the future.
And, like, they're not supposed to be able to live here. So trying to terraform it for the alien is, like, not... That's not what should be happening. In this book, that does not come through at all. Because...
It's mentioned, like, 3 times.
Yeah, it is.
And, like, once in the first section where, like, Kynes is talking about, like, hey, we want to make this planet more livable. And then in his death scene, it's talked about, and then in the appendix.
Well, and Stilgar and Paul have a conversation about it where they're like, we're on the same page, right? And they're like, yeah.
Well, and Paul, in the first part, Paul basically just uses it as a way to get the Fremen to support him. Like, hey, if you help make me emperor, I can help you do this. And they're like, okay.
And they go along with that. But it's like, I don't know, I feel... And, you know, it's like the Star Wars thing. You ever talk to... Listen, full disclosure, I've been this person. But you ever talk to a Star Wars fan and they're like, hey, this doesn't make sense. And it's like, well, did you read this book that came out in 1984? Because it explains it. That really feels like this. I know, obviously, it's a series, but people talk about this first book. There's nobody out there's like, dude, you gotta read Dune Chapter House, man. Like, nobody says that. So
yeah, people say you gotta read the first Dune because it's like ecological science fiction. Meanwhile, it's a pretty straightforward story of a duke becoming an emperor.
Yeah, like in the it's just the. There's no, like... Listen, I understand subtlety and subtext, but there's no dissenting voice to almost anything any character ever brings up in this book. That's something I kept noticing, is like, oh, we're going to make the planet more livable? Oh, literally everybody agrees on it. Oh, Paul wants to be the Duke? Okay, literally everybody except for, like, big air quotes, the bad guys, agrees on it. Like, I don't know. It just felt like
it's not folded in. It feels like just like it feels like a hodgepodge of cool, crazy ideas Frank Herbert had, and then he just like put them all out there. And like that's really it.
There's a lot going on.
Especially, I think, in contrast to the previous book we read, which was The Dispossessed, which was the characters and the ideas and the world were all, like, I'd say basically seamlessly interwoven.
Well, that was something I was thinking about a lot, especially when I finished it, was like, that The Dispossessed is also a book that's really just about, like, themes and philosophical ideas, but, like, I don't know. I will always remember Dr. Shivek and like his
surviving
plight.
On a barren planet.
Yeah, you know? I know, and it just felt like at one point he's trying to talk about ecology in this sort of or metaphorical way of, and then at the same time he really wants to tell this just like messianic story. And I just don't think they're meshed very well together in this book. I don't care if it's better in the other ones. We're not talking about the other ones. It's this one.
Okay, so let's go through more of what happens. Liet Kynes dies, and sort of also dies any consideration of the whole ecological aspect of this story, which, it may come around in Dune Messiah, which could be interesting. Jessica and Paul are sort of folded into Fremen culture, and for a variety of reasons, he is starting to check all the boxes of like being the Fremen chosen one, aka the Lisan al Gaib. And part of that is because the Bene Gesserit order has like planted this myth on this planet thousands of years ago. Part of it is just Paul is good at stuff.
Yes.
Like fighting. Part of it is Paul can kind of see the future. And part of it is Jessica is really smart at reading body language. And so she can like say the right things or have Paul say the right things. And so through all those factors, they're like, oh, he's the chosen one and he should be in charge of us. So there you go.
Yeah, it's a big scam, but also it's not, because he can see the future and is really good at everything.
Yeah, that is one of, I think, the most interesting parts of this book. It's like is it opportunism? Is it skill? Is it inevitable? Is it not inevitable? Because multiple times Paul like sees the future of like, my future, if I follow this path, it is like marred in blood and horror as my jihad rages across the galaxy. And then he like still keeps going, but also he can't not keep going.
Yeah, he keeps trying to if taking steps back, if the destination you're going backwards in is universal jihad, he keeps taking one step forward and then like 18 million steps backwards. It's like it's like, oh, we finally got accepted into this culture. Oh, but I kind of had to kill this guy. Oh, but I like cried over him, but like, oh, but now they all start to worship me because I like used my water on this dead body.
Yeah.
He keeps stumbling into a jihad.
Yeah, it's like he stumbles into it, but like also he can see the different paths. And they talk about like he can't perfectly see the future. It's like he has like a memory, but it's like of a future possibility. And then they talk about like points in his life where like it's dark. He like can't see. He's in a valley and can't see over the mountain. And that's when like he's like, okay, I don't know what happens here, so it's usually like a fight where he has to win, and then he wins. And so the next big thing happens is that Paul fights Jameis, who was a guy who was like mad that Jessica beat him up. And then Paul stabs him in the head. And according to Fremen culture, Paul like takes possession of Jameis's family.
Sure does.
Including like his wife and his two sons, who start being little bodyguards.
Yes. Yeah, they do.
And Paul, I don't know if it's a play on like straight white male fantasy, but it's like, oh no, I'm in this strange culture, and I have a wife now because the culture tells me I have to get a wife. Oh, and this other girl is also now instantly in love with me too. Oh, darn.
And he's like, you don't have to be my wife, you'll just be my servant forever. Like, you can do whatever I say, wink, wink.
And she's like mad that he won't have sex with her.
Yeah, well, of course. It's like, that whole thing. I was like, what? What are we doing here?
I think that's Frank Herbert being a little pervy.
Yeah,
I think there's some things where like, oh, this is a sci-fi book from the '60s.
Yeah.
But through all this, Paul basically becomes a real Fremen, and he cries at James's funeral. And everyone thinks that's like a big deal because he's shedding water for his for this fallen Fremen.
Is this the time jump?
Oh, no, not yet. There's two more things. We meet Fade Routha, and there's a knife fight.
Oh, right, with the gladiator.
Yeah, Gady Prime, which is the Harkonnen homeworld. And guess what, everyone? Baron Harkonnen is still fat.
Yes, he is.
And you will not go a page without being reminded how fat he is.
Yep, and he's got suspensor chairs, and the glow globes shine strangely over his belly rolls. Oh, boy.
But there's like a bunch of like court intrigue where like now Thufir Hawat, who is the mentat of the Atreides household, is like serving the Harkonnens, and he's like playing Fade Routha against the Baron, and then Fade Routha has like a plan to make it seem like the slave gladiator he's fighting was like not drugged, even though he like still has power over him. So it's like all this like plans within plans, and they're all scheming against each other, and it kind of goes nowhere.
Yeah, it's
so it's hard to care about it.
I don't understand. I don't get this part.
It's like sci-fi plot stuff. Like, I think it happens to happen.
Yeah, so here we meet Count Fenring.
Yep. And his wife,
Fenring,
who
right. Yeah.
speak in the most annoying way
they're like
possible. Do you want to describe how they speak?
Yeah, so him and his wife are like real cunning, like killers and plotters and spy masters, what have you. And in order to disguise their conversations, they talk like Woody Allen.
And now, by talk like Woody Allen, what do you mean?
So we're they're like very. It's like they're like nervously like pausing and like It's fucking terrible.
And if you've not read this book, dear listener, Frank Herbert writes out every single one.
It happens all the characters in this book are constantly going like like it's like AH-AH-AH is how Frank Herbert writes, like somebody going like which is so. It looks like they're going and then they start talking. It took me a while. It sounds like a robot is like thinking and then talking.
Like we gotta leave that, and like we have to leave this interesting messianic plot to be like, here's the evil people scheming, and this weird guy that talks in code on a different planet. Okay, and then we're back. Like it's. I think
the only thing of
very,
like
again 60s. This is also a 60s sci-fi book. Like remember,
the only thing of plot importance here is like the last two sentences where we learn that like Fade Routha is like a project of the Bene Gesserit.
Yes,
which we know Paul is.
Yes.
And so and we know that they're related. So they're both like, It's like two rising stars in like a local theater scene, like trying to duking it out for lead role in Footloose or whatever. But also, so he fights this slave gladiator who I thought like we had like met already, because I don't know, I thought it might have been like Duncan, Idaho.
That would have been kind of interesting, but
it's not. It's just some dude.
It's just a random guy.
And so their big plan here is that normally that these gladiator shows sound really boring, and that like it's just some royal goes into the arena and then they pretend
he's like the royal heir. He's like the heir to the Baron.
Right, yeah.
And basically then everyone knows he has poisoned knives.
Right, yeah, it's not a surprise. He's like one knife that's not poisoned and one knife that is poisoned. And the person like has this drug on them that like makes them slow or whatever, and then he just goes up and like stabs them and kills them. And then, but this
everyone's
time...
like, yes, go to work. Go to work, your royal heir.
This time, they're going to pretend... but not really pretend, because it's for real, that the drug doesn't work, and he's really gonna fight the gladiator, but then it'll work like at some point in the battle. Because he has a code word that will like relax all the muscles, and he can stab him in the head. And this gladiator almost kills Feyd-Rautha, but code word still works. Or, does he get poisoned? I can't remember. Does the code word not work? Is that what it is? And then he, like, hits him with the poison, and then the gladiator stabs himself in the chest. Listen, it doesn't matter. Feyd-Rautha wins just barely. And people are going... people on this planet are... Because this... Oh, yeah. This doesn't take place on Arrakis. This is on Harko, right? Isn't that what it's called?
Or the Giedi...
Giedi
Prime is the Harkonnen homeworld.
So they, the audience is going crazy, and they're like, "We love Feyd-Rautha." But then,
is this when it's revealed where like the Baron will be like, "Okay, we're gonna make everyone hate Rabban Harkonnen, who is on Arrakis now," and then he's gonna like remove him and then put Feyd-Rautha in, and then everyone will love him.
Yep, because Fenring also. He is, I think
is directly from The Prince by Machiavelli.
Is it really?
I just watched a video, like a philosophy video, where I think that's a literal example of like, a way to be a good ruler is you put someone in charge who is awful and they do an awful job, and then you take them out and you put someone in and everyone will love him even if they're also a dictator.
Well, I mean, it's like a sound plan if you're an evil bad guy. But Count Fenring threatens the Baron. Like, they have this very tense conversation where the Baron and Count Fenring know they've got dirt on each other.
And I'd forgotten all this was part of the book.
Really?
From what I remembered from the book, it was like there were like 2 scenes with the Harkonnens, and the rest of it was just on Arrakis with Paul.
No, there's big chunks.
I remember all this. There's the slave gladiator fight, and one of them's supposed to be drugged, but he's really painted. I'm like, whoa, I don't remember this at all.
Yeah, but I mean, that's it. The Baron and there's just more court intrigue that like really. I mean, hey, spoiler alert, guys. The Baron dies.
The Baron dies, and then Feyd-Rautha dies.
Yes,
so it's sort of like, all right.
Yeah, Feyd-Rautha never actually gets to be in charge of Dune.
And then Thufir Hawat dies. Like, literally everyone in these scenes who was important or plotting, they just die by the end of the book.
The gladiator is dead. The slave master they plotted with dies. Like, they're all dead.
And Paul doesn't even have to do anything. Like, he'll just kind of die.
Yep.
Okay, and so the end of book 2, or I guess part 2 of this book, which is book 1 of a series. Never mind, I'm going to drive myself crazy. Jessica, back with the Fremen, Jessica becomes the new Reverend Mother of the Fremen, because there's like a wrinkly old woman, and she she brought out like a wheelbarrow or something.
Yeah. Yeah, she
don't quite remember.
She has like a bottle of Coke Zero, and she's in a wheelbarrow, and she's like, "Drink this soda," and then you're the new Reverend Mother.
Yeah, Jessica like drinks this. They call it the water of life, which is like a poison.
Yeah,
and then she, using her crazy Bene Gesserit powers, like, rearranges the molecules of this poison and turns into a harmless psychedelic.
Hell yeah, man.
And she, like, absorbs all the previous lives of the other Reverend Mothers in, like, the chain. And so she has, like, all their experiences and knowledge when she starts this insane psychedelic trip with all the other Fremen. The important detail being that Jessica is pregnant at this time, and her fetus awakens into consciousness with the knowledge of all these previous Reverend Mothers. And that becomes important in the next part.
So he, Frank Herbert, so this is just like magic mushrooms. Like, that's a big...
It is a 60s sci-fi novel.
And he was big into, like, psilocybin and magic mushrooms.
Oh, I'm sure.
So it's just very funny to me that, like, you take a poison thing... It could be like a poisonous mushroom, and she like rearranged it to be like a cool, like, we're gonna hang out and experience like total familiarity with each other's bodies.
Which is what Paul and Chani do, and instantly fall in love.
Yep, they do. Even though she is a total non-character.
Though I've heard she has elfin features.
Oh, yeah. Elfin, not Elvin. Elfin.
That's a deep cut for all you Tolkien heads.
Yeah.
But yeah, it mentions she has elfin features probably 5 times. I think every time she comes up, it's like Chani and her elfin features.
And it's like, that's so interesting to me because, like, do these people know what elves are?
Well, that's the whole... can you say champagne in fantasy argument?
Right. Yes,
like,
that's true.
You're going to drive yourself crazy.
Well, this book is really good about that. Like, it never describes anything, but then it's like, she looks like an elf, from Lord of the
Rings. Oh, man. And I had like a double take line in here. I think it was at the end of this part where someone was talking about like the future stuff, or Jessica was saying, and she says the line, "You cannot back into the future," which is kind of interesting, but I could not stop thinking of Back to the Future. Like, that's like just like Back to the Future.
You cannot go back to the future, Johnny.
DeLorean.
Johnny! The Harkonnens, Johnny! This will just come up briefly later, but the water of life is water that a big worm died in.
Yeah, like when a big sandworm dies, it like exhales this. Probably it's like stomach acid or something.
Yeah, it's gross.
And it's poison, but hey, magic Jedi can turn it into magic mushrooms.
She sure can.
And now we have the big famous 2-year time jump.
Oh yeah, baby.
Between book 2 and book 3. And now 2 years have passed. The beginning starts with a more pointless Baron and Feyd-Rautha and Thufir Hawat nonsense.
They were really losing me with this part. They're just like sitting around, and he's like, "Oh, you're really gonna kill me? Oh, but you're not, because you know I need to be the Baron." Everybody in this scene is dead by the end of the book.
And I think the only reason this is important is because something the Baron said offhand made the Emperor think that the Baron was using Arrakis to like make his own version of the Sardaukar.
Yes, yeah, he wanted to. He says to Count Fenring, the plan is to make Arrakis Salud Secundus or whatever the
Salusa Secundus,
yes.
The Emperor's prison planet.
Yes, oh, that's like a good vocal warm up.
Which they talk about, like, I think twice during a page. Then, like, Thufir says Salusa Secundus, and he's like, "You mean the Emperor's prison planet?"
Yeah,
like, no, that's the Emperor's prison planet.
But yeah, so that's he wants to make Arrakis that, and then the Baron's like, "I might have told the spy master I was planning to do this," and he's like, "That was catastrophically stupid."
But we could talk about this forever, but it doesn't matter. But Paul and Chani have a son, Leto the Second.
Yep, not a... I mean, who cares? I mean, this is not important.
No, we'll wait till it comes up in the book. He's very important to this book. But more importantly, Jessica has given birth to a daughter, Paul's sister Alia, and she is a super smart, creepy baby because she's 2 and she is a conscious adult with all the wisdom and knowledge of all the Reverend Mothers.
Yep.
And she doesn't fit in at school.
She doesn't. She's getting
There's
bullied.
a whole scene where she's being left out because she talks like an adult.
Yeah.
And another thing that took me out of it was when they have a whole conversation where she's like, I'm a freak. And I'm like, oh, are you in American high school?
Yeah, I know. Like,
really? I laughed out loud.
There's sandworms. Like, you're not a freak. Like, what does that even mean in the context of this world? Like, no, you're not. Paul is a freak.
It's very funny. A freak with elfin features.
Yeah, she's getting... Hera is Paul's wife servant, right? That's her name?
Yeah. Yep.
They have, like, this really weird moment where... I guess it's, like, nice, but I'm like, what are we doing here? Where... he's like, who called you? It's like, it feels like it belongs in a totally different book. It like they're talking about like how she's getting bullied, and the mom's like, well, you're just as normal as anybody else is, honey. And she's like, boy, thanks. And I'm like, okay,
I'll go talk to them. And
yeah, I'm like, cool.
You're just misunderstood. All right, and then the chapter ends.
Yeah.
I think it's just like. Herbert was like, "Oh fuck, this scene has just women in it. I don't.
Paul,
what do women talk about? The girl doesn't fit in. The girl's being bullied." But in these 2 years, Paul has sort of become in charge of all the Fremen, and he's teaching them battle tactics, and Jessica is teaching them the weirding way, and they're becoming super powerful. A super powerful army, and so they're like sabotaging the Harkonnens and doing raids and stuff.
Oh, I guess we forgot to talk about this. Paul like chooses the name Muad'Dib.
Yes, which means mouse.
Which means mouse, and they're like, okay, whatever. Well, he's like, it's a really. I thought this was a dumb scene where he's like, well. Paul internally is like, well, I'm Muad'Dib in all the visions where I'm evil, and he's like, how about Paul Muad'Dib? And I'm like, what? Just call yourself something different then. Like, what the fuck? Whatever.
Paul has an elite force of death commandos who are his personal bodyguards.
It's pretty sweet.
Called the Fedaykin. And I think it implies that was started by the little boys who were
really?
like Hera's, because I was thinking about it, like, oh yeah, they sort of started being his little bodyguards, and then 2 years later he has a whole like platoon of death commandos, and like it must be like those 2 little boys were like, we're doing this for our new dad.
That's awesome. I didn't even think about that. That's so funny.
And Paul is a fully fledged and integrated Fremen, except for one thing, and that means he has to ride a sandworm.
Yep,
Matt, do you want to talk about riding the sandworm?
I guess it might be the only thing. If you don't know anything about Dune, this might be the only thing you do know about Dune, is that somebody rides a sandworm at one point.
And the fact that it happens 3/4 of the way through the book.
Yes, it sure does. So essentially, you like have these 2 big like sticks, and when the worm goes by you gotta like jam them in between the scales of the worm, and then you can ride the worm around. And this means in the Fremen culture that you have sort of conquered the desert. Like, you are fully fledged Fremen, meaning you can live in the desert, not be scared of any of the natural dangers that come with it. And Paul like really biffs it up and gets into a big argument with Stilgar about this, but they're like, yeah, whatever, you're good, you're technically a Fremen.
Well, and this was another moment where he's like, and another day where that my actions will become legend, because like the sandworm approaches and he's like, this is the biggest sandworm that
it's the biggest one on like the whole planet, or maybe not literally, but it's the biggest one they've ever seen.
I guess they really think I am the chosen one because of this too, probably. So he does that and it's fine. He gets reunited with Gurney Halleck, who is in charge of all the smugglers. And okay, so you're gonna say something about this. So Paul learns that Gurney Halleck is alive and like doesn't want to make contact lest the Harkonnens find out through someone. But at some point he decides like, oh, I am going to make contact with him. So they like raid the smugglers that the Fremen that Paul's part of raid the smugglers that Gurney Halleck is sort of leading.
So at the end of the Sandworm chapter, they see the ornithopter above them, and Paul is like, oh, that's smugglers, but we don't want them to find us, so we better go kick their ass. But Paul, they've intercepted like a message or whatever, like he knows Gurney Halleck is out here somewhere. So they go and do that. We get POV switches next chapter. Gurney Halleck POV, and he's like, we've got some new guys in this crew, and they seem nice, and I've got new best friends. And then he turns around, and all of them have been killed by Paul. Like Paul and the Fremen have like raided their spice what do you call it, the spice mine thing?
Spice patch or something.
Yeah, they have that. They have one of those, and then like
the like the carry-all or the factory, whatever takes the spice out of the ground, out of the sand.
They have a big battle over that, and Paul and Gurney Halleck like meet again, and they hug each other. And Gurney Halleck's like, we just learned he felt really close to a bunch of these guys, and the Fremen like killed over half of them, and it doesn't even. Gurney's like, whatever. Like, cool.
I think there's one line where Gurney is like, I never thought Paul didn't used to have such a disregard for human life. I guess he's really changed.
Yeah,
like, something like that.
Yeah, and he's still like super on board. But yeah, it made me laugh. Like they kill all of his new best friends, and he's like, whatever. I'm Paul for life. I'd feel
this
so
kid
betrayed.
I knew once
I know. I'd be so pissed off if I'm one of these guys. I'm just like trying to get an easy paycheck. Well, I don't know, just getting the carry-all, make some cha-ching, and then fucking a bunch of this crazy
Muad'Dib.
This crazy white boy kills me.
Timothy Chalamet comes out of the sand and stabs me in the head.
I don't know. It just was. I thought it was kind of silly. And Paul's like, and then they like round up the other half that they didn't kill, and they're like, well, I'll think about what I'm gonna do about them. But we never hear about them again. So you have to assume they all died. And
I guess
I don't know.
The only thing that comes out of that is some of the people in this smuggler crew are Sardaukar, who are like the Emperor's elite fighting force, and they're there to spy. They're there to try to figure out where Paul is, because word has spread of this upstart prophet among the Fremen, and it's hurting the prophets coming from Arrakis, prophets with an F.
Yes.
And so
I also sorry to interrupt. I also clocked that. There's a line about that where he's like, the prophets are coming. And I was like,
I only clocked that right now.
Oh, really?
So,
I was like, yeah. I see what you're doing, Frank.
But yeah, so then Paul like captures the Sardaukar and like kills one of them, and then releases one of them to like tell the Emperor like, I'm here, bitch, and it's Paul Atreides.
There's this hilarious part where they're having like coffee or whatever, and then there's like a commotion.
Also, wait, can we pause?
Yeah.
It takes me out every time when they have coffee.
I know that.
Like in this desert, he's like, oh, and
Paul's
during coffee service, Paul. I'm like, what the hell? Hera gives him Chani gives him like a new coffee set.
No, he kills this guy. He kills Jameis, and then it's like, you get Jameis's coffee maker.
You get his wife, her 2 sons who will be your little boy bodyguards, and his coffee set.
But anyway, they're making
what a goofy book.
They're making coffee or whatever, and they're Mr. Coffee. They're and there's like commotion outside, and like some of the Sardaukar disguised as the Fremen or as the smugglers have like escaped and are fighting, and like Gurney Halleck's like, how can you be so sure they're Sardaukar? And then one of them literally throws a knife at Paul, and he catches it, and it has like the Imperial logo for Sardaukar on it. I was like, what the hell? It was very silly. I was like, and he's like, that's how. And I'm like, what book is this? What are we doing here?
It's a sci-fi book from the 60s.
Yeah, I know. Like parts like that, I'm like, oh, right.
And I think that people talk about it like it's aged well. And I think
it has not.
I think it hasn't aged horribly.
No.
And like a lot of the ideas are still incredibly unique, but there's a lot of this goofy stuff where it's like, oh boy.
Yeah, it is a pretty silly book.
So the next thing that happens is all the young men want Paul to challenge Stilgar, and he because like it's the Fremen tradition that like whoever's in charge has to be has to like overpower the person who's currently in charge. And Paul convinces them with facts and logic that hey, Stilgar knows what he's doing. We probably shouldn't kill our best commander. And they're like, okay.
Yeah, they agreed.
And that was
right
built
away.
up to be a bigger thing than it was.
Yeah.
But I guess part of it is he uses sort of the language of their ritualistic culture to like get what he wants, which is what he's been doing this whole time.
But now the Fremen are on the same page.
And then 2 seconds after that, he's like, I should go try to drink that poison.
Yeah, he does. Yeah, he's like, Paul gets it into his head.
Chani, wait here. And then he goes.
He gets it into his head that he'll be able to solve all the problems if he drinks the water of life. And so he goes and does that.
It'll prove, if he can convert it into that crazy psychedelic drug, it'll prove that he's the Kwisatz Haderach, or the male Bene Gesserit, because only like Bene Gesserit Reverend Mothers are supposed to be able to do that. And if he does it, he's even more OP than he was before.
And spoiler alert, he does it.
Yeah, he does it. And Chani and his mom are all worried about him. He's in a coma for 3 weeks, and then he wakes up and is like, is everyone ready for the climax of the book?
Yeah, that is what happens. Yeah, there's like this whole weird part where they're like, oh my god, Paul might be dead, but you're like, there's like 50 pages left. He's not dead. Like, I don't know. Like, it's like, what are we doing? There was no tension. I don't know. It's a weird little
He's
part,
like, I did it.
Yeah. He like wakes up and he's like, I did it. I'm the Kwisatz Haderach. It's like, okay, great.
And buckle in, guys.
Yeah.
The Emperor's here. He's like, the Emperor's here, and all the senators are here above the planet right now, and we attack tonight.
Yep.
And so here is where the book ends. There's a big climax. The Emperor is in town to like confront the Harkonnens, I think, or to find Paul or something. Like, he's just there just like address problems. And there is a scene with the Emperor, and I don't remember what happens. We finally get introduced to Princess Irulan, who is the Emperor's daughter, and she's the author of all the epigraphs we've been reading before every chapter.
So this scene happens because Paul and all the warriors are like at some like forward operating base, like right outside the
like
shield wall of Arakeen.
Yeah.
And then he gets a message that is all garbled, but what Paul learns is that like their like camp was just raided, and his son Leto was killed. And they captured Aaliyah.
So so Leto the second, who born off screen.
Yeah,
he died as he lived.
Not in the novel.
Not in the book. And then they're all sad about it. Like, Paul and Johnny are so sad. You know, like, this is not a person. It's very funny.
But there's a scene with the Emperor.
That baby dying was very funny.
It's so funny when a baby dies, folks. But the scene with the Baron and the Emperor, the Emperor is like, he's like giving him like leading questions. It's like, well, have you ever been to the South? Probably not, because it's so dangerous, right? The Baron's like, oh my god, it's so dangerous, I never go there. And then the Emperor's like, whoa, look at this. And then Aaliyah like walks out, and Aaliyah's like, my brother is Paul. And the Baron's like, what? and then they're like having this argument, and the Emperor's like, and And how about you, little weird little adult baby? What do you think about this? And the Bene Gesserit's, the Reverend Mother from the beginning of the book, the very beginning of the book is there. And she's like...
the Emperor's truth-sayer, so she can, like, see through all lies.
And she's like, oh, this kid is fucked up. This kid is so gross and weird and bad. And then the little girl, she's like,
it's like, you're fucked up.
And then she's like, ah! And then the wall behind the Emperor explodes. And they all turn around. And there's like there are all these cool dudes riding sandworms. And Aaliyah stabs the Baron with the Gom Jabbar. And
poison needle, yep. And then the Baron dies. And so what happened was they're going to attack the capital and the Emperor at the same time as this big sandstorm. And there's like a shield wall that sort of protects it's like a series of cliffs or a rock wall that protects the capital city from like the brunt of these huge sandstorms. And not unlike Stormlight Archive.
Yeah. Big. Yep.
Anyway.
Big.
Fuck.
It all comes back to the greatest living writer of all time.
And so they use atomic bombs to blow up the shield walls so that they can attack at the same time as this sandstorm at full force hits this city, so none of the Emperor and all the people can't escape to space in their ships. And they ride sandworms in and fight the Sardaukar, and it'd be pretty cool to get a description of that battle and not just have it be one sentence long.
Yeah,
I guess that'd be cool, but we don't get any of that.
We don't get it, and the Baron just dies from this little girl.
The Baron dies, and then the next chapter, Paul walks into the Emperor's giant metal hut, victorious. He's like, well, we won, guys.
Yep.
And he's like, hey, Emperor, you make me Emperor, or I'm going to destroy all the spice. And he's like, I won't do that. Talk to your friend Thufir Hawat. And Thufir comes by, and he's like, I will not use this poison needle to poison Paul. And he poisons himself and dies. And then Paul is like, I'm the Kwisatz Haderach, but Reverend Mother, I'm not going to listen to anything you say. And she's like, oh no. And then he talks to the Spacing Guild. And this is the big reveal, is that the Spacing Guild is completely reliant on the spice, because in order to ensure safe passage of their ships, they need that, the future sight of the spice. So Paul can threaten to destroy it, and the guild is like, okay, we'll do whatever you say. And then Paul's about to win when Feyd-Rautha is like, hey, remember how we hate each other? Can I fight you with knives?
But they don't. This is the first time they've ever met.
Yes. Well, it's their feud. He invokes the feud between their houses.
Yeah. Chun. What's it called? It's like
Chanley.
Yeah, Chanley. Yeah.
Which sounds like a guy.
It sounds like you're trying to say,
hey, Chanley. Hey. Stanley and Charlie.
Yeah.
Chanley.
Hey, Chanley's here. It's like two best friends, Stanley and Charlie.
So Paul kills Feyd-Rautha in about 2 seconds.
Yep.
And then Paul's like, hey, here's what I want. I want all my friends to have a lot of money, and I want to be the Emperor.
Deal.
And I want to marry your daughter.
Deal.
And the Emperor's like, deal. And then the end ends with Jessica telling Chani that they're going to be really mean to Princess Irulan.
Yep.
And then the book ends.
Sweet.
Crazy.
So I was a little unclear about this. Paul does become the Emperor. He doesn't just say I'm going to be it next. He is now the Emperor.
Yes, he was like, all right, Emperor, you're going to liquidate all your holdings in the Chom Company, give them to me, and you're going to retire on your estate, and I will be Emperor now.
Oh, yeah, he was going to send him to Seleucia Secundus to, live, and he's like, no, we'll make it nice. It's like, you'll live there.
Any other, thoughts you had about specific sections? I have 2 things.
No, please,
but do you have anything? We can talk about this now because you mentioned it earlier. The whole Jessica being the traitor and everyone thinking she's the traitor, I was so annoyed by that the whole time.
Really?
Where Thufir hates her.
Yeah.
Because he heard once that it's because he doesn't like her. And he's supposed to be this hyper logical guy. And then
that's true.
Gurney heard it too, and like, oh, it must be true, and then it gets resolved in like 2 seconds, and then it's never important.
Yeah, it'd
be more interesting if there were consequences to that misunderstanding, but there are no consequences to that misunderstanding.
Like if Gurney Halleck actually killed Jessica.
Yeah, or like hurt her, and that had something, or like, yeah, and then like hurt her, and then Paul had to like execute Gurney or something, and then like that, you know, like it would
drives him closer to like the jihad.
Yeah, make these characters have to go through something.
I just like that it was consistent because they never actually got the information. I just appreciated that, like, on screen, they're all at all times until learned otherwise were like, these are my beliefs. I like that they didn't just like well, I guess it probably wasn't her. I guess we don't have to deal with that anymore. I was just happy that like it was consistent, but your complaints are you're valid. You're being very valid right now, Danylo.
Oh, thank you for validating.
Yes, of course.
I need someone to validate my complaints. No one ever does this for me.
my parking and my complaints, the two things I need validated.
I also really liked the descriptions of the planet. Like, there's like the variety. It's not just sand. Like, they talk about like the varieties of sand, and like here are these rock formations, and like this sort of sand is different, and then like the colors of the sunset and the sunrise and the moon at night and stuff like that. Like, I thought the descriptions of the planet were really fleshed out, and I liked it. To have a horrible stereotype, it's almost like the planet is another character in the book.
Yeah, almost. I've never heard that before.
Yeah,
the setting's like the sixth man.
Like another character.
Wow.
I know. That's all I have to say about specific stuff. Should we talk about the book as a whole?
Yeah, I guess so.
All right, what do you got to say?
I mean, if it wasn't in the cultural imaginary that this was a seminal work of science fiction, I would not have thought that was the case after just reading this first one. That's for sure.
Yeah.
Like, I don't understand the obsession with this series. Like,
there's a lot of hype.
Yeah, there is.
And it might be, is it overstated to call it Mistborn syndrome? Where describing what happens and thinking about it in retrospect makes it seem better than it is.
Yeah, I mean that tracks.
Because you talk to people about like the sandworms, and there's the spacing guild that controls the space travel, and there's a prophet in the desert who can see the future. You know?
Yeah, it sounds all very cool, and then this book is I don't know, it's just not written very well. Like, again, I feel like it's like little subplots and chapters that kind of lead nowhere. It feels like it's all set up, which it is.
But also like not in a way that the next book would be payoff. Like, the plot things do all tie up, but just like not in a satisfying way. Like, I feel like the last battle could have been, you know, a whole part of the book about like, oh, they're doing this, and then like Paul's on a sandworm, and like, you know, maybe Gurney Halleck dies or something, you know, who knows? But like, all his friends are fine, and they get a bunch of money and power in the new empire.
And we keep hearing about the Beast Raban, like this terrible despot ruler of Arakeen, and he just is not he's on 2 pages of this whole book.
We'd rather go to Giedi Prime to see a knife fight that doesn't matter than to talk about like the main ruler of Dune, of Arrakis after Duke Leto.
And like the book frames Fade Routha and Paul's like showdown as some like, I know it came after, but some fucking Luke Skywalker, Darth Vader-esque showdown. And it's like, no, they have no relationship other than they are both, like, one is the successful, like, experiment making the Quetzalcoatl Haderach, and the other one is just some creep.
And there's no tension because, you know, Paul's going to win.
Right, yeah, of course.
Like, it's not going to cost him anything. Like, it's hard to tell whether, is this commentary on like Chosen One myth where he's just good at everything all the time and is not really a character and just wins everything. Because in the first part of the book, he's like, yeah, I'm going to use the Fremen and control the spice to blackmail the emperor and become emperor. And then he does it.
Yeah, he does exactly that.
And it's a pretty straight line.
Yeah, I don't know. It's just left feeling sort of flat. Fell flat for me. Dune did.
Yeah, I agree. and it's cool.
Oh, it's definitely cool.
I think the ideas are very cool, and I think for me that's what stands out is like the world building part of it still feels very fresh and unique, despite the fact that it's influenced all these things, like the still suits that trap the water mixed with like the spacing guild needs this natural resource to see the future to make sure the faster than light travel they don't crash into any planets, and so they have a monopoly. Like I think that stuff's all very cool, that like I don't know if it's so unique that like it would be really immediately obvious if anyone tried to copy the specific parts of this.
Yeah.
Like the general part of like evil empire, chosen one overthrows it, you know. But I think the specifics are where it shines. Maybe not the plotting or the characters.
No, characters definitely not. But yeah, I don't know. It was fine.
Yeah, I agree. It was fine. I was like I said before, like I started out annoyed, and then I liked it, and then I ended it annoyed.
Yeah, and I don't know, maybe this just isn't... I've heard that Frank Herbert, I don't know if he said this or like a reviewer said this, but like I think he said it, that he writes science fiction for people who don't read science fiction. And it's like, I do like science fiction, but this just wasn't, I don't know, this wasn't for me.
It also isn't... It isn't really science fiction.
No.
It's like maybe by the sort of the measure of the day it was, but it's more like space fantasy.
Yeah, and even then, I mean, it's barely like they have swords, and it's just like I don't know. There's large swaths of this book where people are just like characters who are poorly written are sitting around talking to each other, and it's like, oh my god.
How they don't fit in at school.
Yeah, that was... Man.
And people scheming. I guess if you like reading about people's scheming, and you...
Oh, yeah.
And you never want to read between the lines, because he writes it all out for you.
He will tell you.
And I guess that might be fun. I think it's... You know, all in all, I think it's worth reading. I think it's still worth reading. But I don't... I was reading online, and people are like, I've read this book 20 times, and I still find new things. I'm like, I don't understand how. Like, yeah, it's cool, but I don't know.
Yeah, I don't know either.
You know what's funny? I think the movie's going to be better than the book.
Oh, definitely, yeah.
Because it's going to cut out all the bullshit.
Yeah.
Because what I remembered from the book is what happened in the movie. And then I read all this other stuff about, like, they think Jessica's the betrayer, and then Thufir Hawat and Jessica have like a showdown where like, I'm gonna prove to you that and that doesn't go anywhere. That's on the whole first part.
And then Gurney Halleck and Jessica have a showdown about the same thing, and then that doesn't go anywhere. They just resolve that.
So I guess I would say maybe, you know, didn't age badly, because I think all the stuff, and we talked about this a little bit last time, the whole like, you know, borrowing from Islamic culture for the Fremen, I think is handled pretty well.
Yeah, it's like Islamic and Buddhist and the
spice is oil, and it's all about like exploiting cultures for natural resources and the humans' relationship to the planet, and
like fighting proxy wars. In the cultural imaginary of a little bit after, you know, when this book comes out, you know, Vietnam and
Korea was before this.
Oh yeah, Korea. That was like the forefront of somebody manipulating somebody else to fight somebody else is a big part of this book, and I can imagine reading it at the time it comes out and being like, oh, this is just like what's happening now, but it's also like smart. But I don't know.
I also wish it was more upfront that that's what it was about. Because, like, I think it's almost like he wanted it to be about that. But, like, he was too into the, I'm a 1960s science fiction writer. And so he has to put this, like, court intrigue and political plot stuff that doesn't go anywhere. Whereas, like, if you use that page count to, like, you know, explore, like, is Paul conflicted about doing this? He always seems conflicted for about, like, one second, and then he's like, I'm still gonna do it.
Yeah. You're like, we cut out all this shit about the fucking chome. Like, I don't care how the Emperor, like, liquidates his assets. Like, holy shit, that is not important. Ugh. Whatever. Yeah. I agree. I think you should still read it, but, I mean, it's not. Don't, I would not fall into the hype. I would not get a ticket aboard the hype train. I'd just read it and take it at face value.
Yeah. And it could be part of it. Some people like really like it, and then when they reread it, they really like read into it more, maybe. But like, you know, for my money, like the plot is fairly straightforward.
Yeah, I think so.
With some weird vocabulary, like, I don't know. I guess if you've never read sci-fi before, and you're like, the Chome Company.
Yeah.
What?
But I did not understand.
It's a space company.
Yeah, like, this book did not leave me confused in a way that I was, like, put off by.
There's a glossary at the back.
Yeah,
so if you don't know, you just flip and then you look.
Don't be intimidated by these, like, fucking gatekeepers talk about Dune. They're like, oh, but it's really hard. No, it's fucking not. Just, like, if you don't understand something, it's fine, because 90%, like, the chances are that it's going to be explained in simpler terms just later in the book.
Yep.
You'll be fine.
You'll be fine.
And isn't that really the message at the end of Dune?
It'll be fine.
Guys.
We're all the chosen ones.
It's going to be fine. I am the Muad'Dib, the desert mouse. Guys.
Should I do my book report on
on the appendices?
I found these more interesting than the ending of the book. Yeah. It's clearly, it feels so clearly that, like, this is what he was interested in. The first appendix of, like, the ecology of Dune is, like, they're basically, like, encyclopedia entries about, his name is Pardot Kynes, so he was Liet Kynes' father, about how he was the first imperial planetologist on Arrakis, and he talks about, like, figuring out what sort of plant life and, like, the interconnectedness of, like, oh, if we plant the cactus, then, like, we need to have a mouse, and then, like, if we have a mouse, we need to have, like, a hawk and stuff. And so it's like him figuring all this out and doing all the calculations about, like, this is how much, you know, all the water we need to make Dune a paradise is here. We just have to, like, collect it, and, like, what sort of plants we use to anchor the dunes. And, like, it's clearly he was very passionate. Frank Herbert was very passionate about this part of it, and that just seemed cool. And it had nothing to do with a future seeing prophet doing a galactic-wide jihad. The second appendix was, like, history of, like, the religions in this galactic empire, and about how, like, there's all these different religions, and there's, like, Zen Sunni and Zen Shia, which is, like, Zen mixed with, like, Islam, and then there's all these, like, compound words of like religions on our world. And he talks about, like, at some point there were, like, these religious representatives came together to, like, have the final word on religion, and they locked themselves up in a room for, like, 7 years, and then one of them committed suicide, and then they, like, tried to distill all the ideas, and then, like, that's how they wrote the Orange Catholic Bible, which appears, and, like, it led to wars and protests and all that stuff. Wow. And then it talks about the Butlerian Jihad, where
that's the robot war.
That's the robot war, where they're like, no more. The robots gain sentience and try to kill everyone, and so they're like, no more robots. And again, it really seemed like he cared so much about the religion aspect. Hence why he made, like, Fremen culture super consistent and detailed and well thought out.
That's the best. The Fremen are the best part of the book, I think. Yeah. It's too bad there's space kings and stuff, but yeah, I don't care about that.
And the Chome Company.
The Chome Company, of course, and the Spacing Guild.
And then I think another appendix is about, like, the Bene Gesserit and how, like, they all ignored the fact that Paul was actually the Kwisatz Haderach the whole time, and how that was a mistake.
Oops. Yeah, now you know.
And then another one's the fourth one's like a glossary. So that's Dune.
That's Dune, everybody. Well, sorry. I promise I'm not Listen, Dune didn't put me to sleep, but let me tell you. Should we, the next thing we're reading?
Well, maybe we end the episode and then we chat offline about what the next thing we're reading.
Ooh, dear listener, you don't know. You're in the dark.
We can release it on our marketing.
Yes. Oh, yeah. We should plug that. You can follow us on like stuff now. It was technically there before, but now there's actually stuff on there.
Yeah. Follow us on
your Instagrams, your
it's just Instagram. I think we have a Facebook page.
Yeah. I was gonna say if we have an Instagram, we definitely have a Facebook page. But both is just at Hardcover Hooligans, where we will announce the next book.
And if you like the show, please tell your friends, because we're a small podcast, but we're gonna keep doing this. So if you like this, please tell people about it.
Yes, we do. Hey. We'll read anything. We read all 3 Mistborn books.
We really cannot sink lower, I believe. Yeah. That is one of the most unpleasant reading experiences of my entire life.
Yeah, not bad. All
right. Bye, everyone.
Bye, everyone. Thanks for listening.
I'll edit in a better ending.
No, that's perfect.